Hello, everybody. How are we doing? Come on, there's a Q&A section. I need a response. Thank you very much. My name is Anna Higgs. I'm Managing Director of drama production company Character 7. And I am a part-time moderator because I love talking to completely genius people about what they do and being really nosy. And we have 3 real geniuses here. To start with, we're going to do visual descriptions of ourselves as part of our intro so that it's accessible on the podcast and all of the recordings of this. I am a middle-aged, middle-height white woman with curly hair that gesticulates too much when I talk, but I'm holding a microphone, so hopefully that will calm me down. Tell us what you're wearing.
Okay, I am a 60-something, brown-haired, bespectacled, wearing a black pattern shirt, black trousers, and white shoes.
Excellent description. And who are you and where do you come from?
I run the film team at Premiere, which is a agency that covers all sorts of entertainment, publicity, based out of London, and we have a big team here in Cannes. This is my 40th trip to Cannes.
Wow.
First came in 1986, and we do publicity here for films across all official sections.
Fantastic. Thank you. KARINA.
Hi, I'm KARINA. A 40-plus petite blonde woman, originally from Ukraine. I do international marketing publicity, specialize in B2B, kind of from script stage all the way to festival premieres. And until recently, I was looking after international marketing publicity at a company called Anton, which I recently left, and I'm now in the process of setting up my own agency. Did I miss anything? What am I doing in Cannes? I'm helping to launch a film called Bear that is shooting right now in London. So that's at the market side. And then I've joined a team that does international publicity called Wolf. And we're looking after 4 films in the festival.
Thank you. MATHIAS.
Hi, everyone. So I'm a 40-plus tall white man with very salt and pepper and more salty hair, and a pink lanyard around my neck. And so I'm the founder and head of strategy at Alphapanda, which is a marketing agency for the film industry. We specialize in particular in social media, so we do a lot of social media campaigns around festivals, which is what we're going to be talking about. We handle social media for Bankside Films, that is premiering next week with the end of it. And we also handle social media for The Match Factory, which has 4 films here in Cannes. And then we're also handling social media for a film that is premiering at Quinzaine called Gabin, that had the premiere 2 days ago. And for that one, we're doing both social media and an influencer campaign. So that's what I'm doing here in Cannes.
Fantastic. And just so we get a sense of who's in the room, can I have a show of hands so we know who's speaking to? Who is a producer? Who is a director or a writer? Anyone in marketing and comms? Oh, so we're coming to hear from some of the experts. Excellent. Anybody I've missed? Festivals? Other folks, actors? No, okay, that's a good mix. All right, brilliant. So we're here at one of the world's leading film festivals and markets. Let's start with festival strategy for films. You guys have talked about, you have particular projects here. Matthias, can you perhaps talk to us? You specialize in launching non-English language films, and I'm really interested to hear maybe about a recent project that's a good example of a festival launch for you.
Yeah, so basically, I mean, the work we do, you know, the way we normally describe the work we do at festivals, it would be a bit like, you know, you hire publicists, you know, to kind of handle all the kind of press side of things, and then you hire us to do like the same, let's say, but on social media. So basically, we say that the normal buzz that happens at the festival around the film, we try to support that and encourage, let's say double that with like through a social media presence. And for example, at the last Berlinale, we had 12 films we were working on that were premiering in the different sections of the festival, and one in particular, which is the one that ended up winning the Golden Bear there, called Yellow Letters. It's a very beautiful film. It's a German film, but entirely in Turkish with Turkish actors. And if you get a chance to watch it, you should. And for example, for that film, we did a bit of an exceptional work because there was, let's say, more traditional social media work. So it would mean, we mostly do social media that is basically aimed at the industry. So it would be B2B. For those of you who are familiar with B2B, B2C, B2C is towards consumers and B2B is towards the industry. And so we do a very kind of B2B campaign. So it would be like identifying really what are the unique selling points for the films when talking to the industry, talking obviously with the sales agent of the film, and then highlighting those through social media posts. Some of them more creative, some of them more standard, like, posting some photos from the premiere, announcement of, screening times, announcement of the selection, trailer launch, poster launch, but then also more creative things that can be mood videos, that can be, these kind of things. And so this is what we did for B4 Films, who was the sales agent of the film. And then in parallel, we also did like an influencer campaign for the film. So in this specific case, because it's a very political film, they wanted to also kind of involve some people who are not necessarily influencers who normally just get paid to kind of talk about the film, but more, people who have quite a lot of followers on social media and who could be interested or touched by the topic of the film. And so we had a very, very limited budget for it, and the idea was mostly to do like free influencer campaign, which, let's say, is not the easiest thing to do, in particular when you start 2 weeks before the festival. But in a way, we ended up, it was my colleague Charlotte here, who is right here, who actually had the big luck to actually have that mission. But we ended up getting 6 different influencers who kind of covered the film and ended up doing some videos like talking about the film, talking about the political topic of the film and about freedom of speech, which is really what the film is all about. So this is also something that we do at festivals. But most of the work we do is really like social media, supporting the industry buzz that is happening anyway through social media posts.
And KARINA, you kind of work across, MATHIAS really helpfully introduced the concept of B2B and B2C, and I was going to explain that for people that didn't get it. But you work across both forms. What for you are the strands that you're trying to draw together? Because it feels like these days there aren't distinct phases of kind of industry launch, then thinking about distribution, then thinking about audience. They're all knitted together now, and it's much more of a complex web.
Yes, so my B2B phase started much earlier, I guess, at script stage, where we would traditionally launch a film at the market before the film is shot. So it's script stage. And at that point, it's predominantly B2B, when through a press announcement, we will announce the film B2B to the industry and to buyers, as well as using marketing tools, we'll create assets for the sales team to help to pre-sell at the marketplace. But already at that point, we would start thinking of what could be or what might be the B2C campaign or positioning. And I mean, having done it for many years and seeing the benefits, I'm a massive advocate of thinking about marketing and positioning at script stage. I know most of you, the main focus is, to get the script in a good place, to find the money, cast, locations, and actually make the film, which totally fair play. That's the main goal. But if you have any time, money, or brain left to actually think of the positioning and think, what are the main hooks of the film? Who might be the audience? What are the similar films? And at the same breath, actually maybe think what this film isn't, because that also helps kind of positioning. And once you start doing it at script stage, then you start building the foundation to how you pitch the film. And again, the way you pitch the film shouldn't be, something you write down and then you're locked. You constantly experiment, and it's a constantly evolving beast. And even the positioning, I've seen cases where at script stage, we will define positioning for the film, and then once it shoots and edits, as they say, you make the film 3 times, this positioning might evolve. Because maybe your plan was to have a more psychological thriller, but actually, it ends up being a psychological horror once it's been edited. So we really start with B2B at script stage, but already thinking of B2C. And another reason to start thinking about B2C early is what I've noticed with distributors who then take your film to release in different countries. back in the day, so I would say 10 years ago, you need to deliver to them a great film, the best version of what you had as a script, and then they take it and run with creating their marketing campaign, using their marketing team and tailoring to their territories. But now I feel that a lot of distributors have smaller marketing teams, while many more films, so the resources are limited. And there's an element of expectations as well as appreciation when the filmmakers or the sales agent are able to deliver already a direction, positioning, or even a campaign that they can take, maybe tweak to their territory and run with it. So they run in parallel. In some instances, when we think of B2B, we think of distributors, and they maybe have slightly different demographics than the true end consumer for the film. And you need to consider both audiences. Another difference between B2B and B2C is, for example, to buyers, you will let them read the script, so you're not hiding spoilers, while, of course, in your consumer-facing campaign, you might hide the spoilers in a trailer and so on. So kind of, there are differences, or maybe to buyers and to press, you want to highlight that, you know, it's commercial and has high production values, but maybe you choose that consumer-facing, you want to make it more authentic, grungy, or, you know, whatever fits the film. So there are kind of a few factors where there might be difference.
And Jonathan, you pointed out this is your 40th year at Cannes, so I think kind of veteran is a good phrase for your level of expertise. In your experience, what is a kind of best-in-class example of launching a film at a festival, whether that be, and you've launched a huge range, maybe compare a debut to a kind of big studio project?
Yeah, I mean, there's an enormous difference between, you know, the debut film and the studio film, because you're doing almost a completely different job. Sorry, I'm not, okay. You're doing an almost completely different job. The big studio films tend to be sold. So they have distribution in place. This, you know, Cannes, Venice, Berlin, wherever you are, could be the only opportunity that the distributors get access to, where the distributors get access to talent. So what you're doing is, in effect, banking interviews for the release. Here, with a small film, or indeed in Berlin or Venice with a small film, you're trying to get attention from the industry to help the sales agent sell it. And so you are, you're doing a very different job. Probably in terms of small films, I'd say the best example that we've worked on in recent years, and, you know, that became the most successful, was After Sun here. Because that film, you know, it was the first-time director, you know, I mean, Paul Mescal was on the up, but he wasn't really a star at that point. The film screened in Critics Week, which, you know, is right at the, people probably know this, but is right at the other end of the crossette. And sometimes people just don't have the time to schlep down to the Miramar and watch things. So that film, you know, we treated very differently, to the bigger studio stuff. We saw it, we loved it, and we knew that obviously what was going to benefit the film more than anything was word of mouth, and securing those sort of positive reviews that we were pretty certain would come. And so we did what every publicist based in Europe does these days, and we screened it before we got to Cannes. That's something that people started doing a few years ago, and has just got bigger and bigger. Because any large festival would, invariably, there are too many films screening. And you have to, you know, obviously we're employed to get as much attention as possible to the ones that we're handling. And sometimes you don't get coverage because people just cannot get into a screening. They can't get tickets, or they get a ticket and they get held up somewhere. And sometimes you just lose out by default. I mean, you know, just sort of accidentally. So screening ahead of a festival, it doesn't guarantee you coverage, it just helps. So, I mean, here, for example, this year, we've just been working on the documentary about Eric Cantona. and we screened it in London to a very small select group of press, which meant that last night after I'm going to use the word embargo. I'm assuming everybody knows what an embargo lift is.
It means you're not allowed to write anything about it or release.
If we screen in London before Cannes, all of the journalists who see the film are obliged to sit on reviews until the festival's official embargo lift, which is the end of the main screening. So we screened Cantonar a couple of weeks ago in London, and we had critics there from Screen, Variety, The Telegraph, and we, that helped us then get reviews yesterday for a film that isn't in competition, because most critics focus on the competition and the sidebar sections are more difficult to get coverage for. And there'll be more reviews dropping today. But we wouldn't have got some of those reviews if we hadn't screened the film in London before coming here, because the other problem with films in sidebars in Cannes is that you don't get a dedicated press screening. So if you've got a filming competition, there are 3 dedicated press screenings and then subsequent screenings that press can get into. Whereas if you've got a film in like a special screening, for example, which is what Cantonar was, the journalists go to the red carpet screening. And it just, reduces your chances of actually securing a review.
Yeah. Well, because also they're up against submitting something else and something else and something else that they've seen earlier that day. For all 3 of you...
I just wanted to add, I'm a big fan of screening films to press in advance, because often then the other option is a link, and, we are in a big screen business, so... at least for press and for festival. And from my experience of screening films to press early, the other advantage is some films really need a moment to be digested and thought through. And when press watch a film at a festival, and when they're back-to-back, and they have a backlog of reviews to write, they just don't have this headspace. And, I do know that, they maybe have certain things to add later on, or they get certain additional thoughts. And that's really a shame. I think, there's so much riding on those reviews in terms of both business and audience that you want to give the critics a moment to think about it.
And the other thing that pre-screening really helps with is word of mouth. Because again, when we pre-screened After Sun, by the time people got to Cannes, I reckon, let's say about 40 UK press had seen the film already. And of course, what that meant, and if you've got a strong film, you can only do this if you've got a strong film. Now, that was a strong film. And what it means, of course, is they come here, they bump into journalists from other countries. They're standing in a queue waiting to get into a screening, and everybody starts chatting, and people start saying, "Oh, what have you seen? Did you see anything in London before you got here?" And that's how that sort of word of mouth starts to grow and grow. And by the time that film screened in Critics Week, there were sort of queues around the block of people trying to get in. That's the sort of thing you can't really control, but if you do have that strong material, it definitely helps.
Just to be, I guess, devil's advocate and go against it. With certain films, I'm a fan of also getting press and buyers to watch it with audience. And I went to watch yesterday Club Kid. I think they did a small UK screening, but most buyers and press have seen it at the premiere last night. And the response in the room was incredible. And, at the event afterwards, you saw all the heads of all the top distributors, and you could just sense it's going to be a bit of a bidding war happening. And I think when press can sense it in a room without counting the standing ovation minutes, because that's not a radar, but sense the room, the response of audience beyond just the clapping and the energy, it adds value.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But I think, the industry is also evolving, and I remember I feel even 5 years ago, at least 10 years ago for sure, people were also saying that, you know, if some films were benefiting from arriving like without any kind of reputation or anything, you know, they were like, oh, it's completely virgin, and then people discover it, and I feel like, at least in my experience, this is less and less true, and I feel like sales agents are doing this less and less, and at least, you know, I can see we had like one film at Sundance a few years ago. We give awards at festivals and markets, and then this film had won like a social media campaign for us, and that sales agent, I'm not going to say names, but the sales agent, they didn't want to publish anything on social media before the premiere of the film, and I think this is more and more a mistake. I think it kind of made sense 10 years ago, but now everything is becoming so competitive, and, you know, attention is so hard to get that, you know, like the idea of that film that arrives out of nowhere at a festival and kind of blooms like a flower isn't really like applicable to the world of
fantasy a
today.
bit. And
You know what I
especially-
mean?
yes,
It's fantasy. It's a bit like, yeah, it used to be. blah,
And
blah,
especially, you know, at some festivals like Toronto, I hopefully there's no one from Toronto, or I don't want to get my numbers wrong, but I think there are about 280 films playing in Toronto, and it's quite hard to get a film pop, even with, you know, top stars.
So building some things on social media, showing some stuff, you know, is actually really useful because it will create that queue that you're talking about. You know?
And classic media's shrinking. I mean, that's the other thing. So, I mean, from the point of view of the sales agents, the most important thing for them is trade coverage. So it's Variety, Hollywood Reporter, Screen, and Deadline. But all of those publications employ fewer staff now than they did 10 years ago, 20 years ago. They send fewer critics down here. So it's become harder to get films covered on the ground, which is another reason why people do all these pre-screenings. It doesn't, like I said, it doesn't guarantee that you get the review, and sometimes people see a film, like it, and then the review never appears because some editor somewhere has decided that that film doesn't warrant coverage. And these are the things you can't do anything about. But doing that sort of thing does help. But I know like the Hollywood Reporter, I mean, he is not so bad, but some of the other festivals are sort of one and a half critics covering the festival. And so they can only fit in so many screenings per day.
And I have a question to you, Jonathan. I know.
I love
we're
this.
not
My
meant
job's
to
so
do that.
easy when the panelists start asking each other questions. I'm just going to have a snooze.
When you pre-screen, do you get a chance to actually target specific critics that might enjoy the film more?
Did you invite
Maybe
Jason
that's-
Solomons to the Cantonar pre-screening? That's the main question.
I didn't.
Oh, well, see, he's a massive football fan.
Yeah, but he's...
Mr. Trick. He's Arsenal. It's true.
He's also a film producer now.
He is now, yes.
Yes, to a point. I mean, with the trades, it's a little easier, but even then, again, Hollywood Reporter, they have one person in the UK, so it's not like you can choose. You just get the person. Some of the others, yeah. I mean, I would have conversations with, for example, Screen, and say actually this might be a good film for X. But in the end, they will do what they want to do. They don't like to be told who to send.
Please cut this section. Oh.
And the national newspapers, it primarily have one critic. So again, it is quite hard to do that.
But so for two or three of you, this panel's called Cutting Through the Noise, and you've all alluded to it. Traditional outlets are shrinking, particularly in that the industry to industry talking space. But what are you doing? What are the ways you're seeing, and particularly I'm bearing this in mind that we have emerging filmmakers in the room who kind of brilliantly get across your marketing. I can't tell you enough the filmmakers that aren't engaged in it, and it is what makes and breaks your film in lots and lots of ways at lots and lots of stages. What should they be thinking about? What should they be embracing that are the non-traditional ways that you're seeing really work for you guys?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say this is non-traditional, but what we find, particularly with debut features, is that the materials can be pretty shoddy.
And when you say materials, EPK, stills?
Stills,
Okay.
primarily. I mean, you don't need to... I mean, I think it's unreasonable to expect a first feature to do an EPK just because...
EPK means electronic press kit. Sorry, it's a sort of PDF of all your stuff for those that don't know.
It's where you basically take a crew on set and interview the director and cast. I mean, that's the sort of luxury that I don't often first features can't afford. But I mean, you should make sure that you have decent stills, and obviously you can take screen grabs, but sometimes they don't work. I mean, we handled a film in Berlin this year for Mubi called Rosebush Pruning, and it's got a very large ensemble cast, none of whom appear on screen together looking straight at the camera, if you get me. Sort of, you know, you've got 8 fairly recognizable actors, but if you can see 4 of them, the other 4, you only get the backs of their heads. So we actually, on set, because one of my colleagues worked on the film on set, did a setup shot of, you know, all of the cast members, and they're a family, so they were arranged in a slightly, because it's a very dark film, so it was a slight sort of stage, slightly sinister way. And that was the shot that went out when the film was announced as being at the Berlin Film Festival, because at least you could see all of the faces of all of the actors. And it's things like that that sometimes producers and directors of first features don't think about.
Yeah.
So you just end up with like 2 significant actors coming to a film festival, and there isn't one decent image where you can see both of their faces.
Got you. KARINA, MATHIAS?
Yes, I just wanted to join Jonathan and say unit photography is crucial. Don't think you can do screen grabs. Screen grabs can be useful for, you know, complementing the days that you didn't have photographer on set. But even if you can get, I don't know, photographer for 5 days and you brief them and you are very strategic with the days you choose, and you kind of, again, have done the exercise of positioning a film and knowing what will be the visual language. It's really, really important down the line. And I worked with so many first-time filmmakers that, you know, cut that line in the budget of unit photographies and were regretting later on. And just to give an example, because if you do get into a festival, whether it's Cannes or any other festival, you then need to send one key still, hero still, to the festival. When they make the announcement, they send a press release to all the outlets with all the films and images. And then all the different outlets can choose, and it could be your image that will be running in a headline or throughout the announcement. And I've seen cases where images were outstanding and, you know, they were picked by all the outlets. Like I worked on Rose with Sandra Hüller in Berlin, and the still was incredible and so distinct. And it was picked by all the trades when the announcement ran. So it's just immediately a free promotion, and you haven't even premiered the film.
But you also have to make sure that that still represents the film
Yes,
that you've made.
100%.
I mean, that's so important as well, because a festival launch is more than likely, particularly again with the first feature, is more than likely to be the first time anybody is aware of your film. And so it's so essential that your first image represents the film that you made and that your sales agent thinks they are selling, because you don't want it to look like a rom-com when it's a horror film, or, you know, so really do think those things through very...
And that it's synchronized also with the logline and synopsis. So all the marketing, publicity, all the 360 is, you know, aligned on the positioning.
No, so I mean, I would say from our point of view, the key still is really essential. We have had so many times situations in which we're working on an indie comedy and there's no single photo that looks funny, you know, and that is because then you can't position your film as a comedy. It's as simple as that. So this is a real problem. But then I would say, I mean, more in general, you should really think like what makes your film unique towards industry professionals that watch 200 films a year, you know? And this is very different than what, you know, will attract the actual audience. And, you know, and film professionals are very blasé because they kind of see a lot of films and they know everything that is made out there and things like that. And very often, you know, there was, for example, this case of 2 documentaries about Peaches, the singer, that were made like that the same year. One premiered at Berlinale, one premiered at Venice. And everyone in Venice was like, oh, no, we already saw it at Berlinale. And then it's like, no, it's another one. So, you know, there is like films are competing against each other in this kind of mental space of all these film professionals. And so you should really sit around the table and think like, what are the unique selling points of my film? And for example, when we worked on a film called The Quiet Girl, that was this Irish film from a few years ago that premiered at Berlinale. And it's a film in Irish language, which is very rare. So for example, this makes the film unique. So when we did our social media campaign at the beginning of Berlinale, we even put some Irish language in our posts. Obviously, nobody understands what we're writing, but that's, or not nobody, but very few people. But it makes the film, it's like, oh, it's that little Irish film, blah, blah, blah. Then when you move to releasing the film, when we did the social media package for the UK, for example, obviously we had to completely hide the Irish language as much as possible. In the trailer, they put some English language and stuff like that, because then this is not a unique selling point towards the audience, because they could be a bit scared by that. So you see, whereas obviously in Ireland, it was a very important positioning element. So what I mean is, like when a film evolves throughout its life cycle, like the positioning elements that you will be highlighting will be evolving. That's a completely normal thing. But at the beginning, and in particular if you're at a festival with the first feature or something small in the side section, you really need to think, okay, what will make this film unique towards industry professionals, and trying to highlight them in your social media presence, in your press kit, in every, like in the synopsis, in all the promotional materials and activities that you implement.
So I want to make sure that we talk a little bit about kind of when you're releasing your film and getting it out there, but I'm also keen to just touch on talent. How do we use talent where we can? You mentioned on the big films, it might only be when you first got them, but including writers, directors and producers as talent, how can they be thinking about capturing materials, being part of their own marketing team and having more interesting and innovative stuff that their marketing and publicity teams might not normally be able to get hold of?
I might take the cue from Jonathan mentioning EPK earlier, which is a delivery item to distributors. So it's a compulsory delivery item, and it costs a fair bit amount of money to create. And having done a bit of research, a lot of distributors actually don't use it in its traditional format. It's basically talking heads of director, producer, and cast answering interview questions. And having realized personally, putting the cost of the EPK against the usage, I really find that there needs to be a new way to capture those interviews and still tick this delivery box, but for something that can also be used for social media. And maybe it's capturing interviews, but on set, and maybe it's the actress as she's taking you through the behind the scene or through the set. Or if there's a specific location and you get the production designer to do the interview there rather than, grey backdrop and talking heads. And I've noticed how definitely younger audience on social media are so interested in anything that is happening behind the scene or the making of. So it's something that can double up in a much more creative way, and it costs much less. Because you could have a younger team. It can be maybe not shot on a phone because some distributors need it in higher specs, but it can be done on a tighter budget and can be something that's used consumer-facing for distributors at a later stage. So I think that's a great way to think of a standard delivery item which is still on all the contracts, but in a more innovative way.
I mean, maybe I can give an example, because, for example, we're working on this South African film at the moment that will start shooting next week, I think, called Granny Lee. And, for example, in that, so we prepared, like, basically a brief for the videographer who will be shooting exactly those kind of things. And this is the story of a queer trans activist in the 80s under the apartheid in South Africa. And so, some of the formats we came up with is taking gay slang from the 80s at the time and asking people today, the actors and stuff like that, what does this mean, And so, funky, quite fun and light-hearted interview. Then we're taking some political quotes from politicians in the 80s in South Africa and politicians, right-wing politicians of today, and we're asking people, is it from that time or is it from today? And they need to guess. And then we're also doing like a makeup tutorial, something fun with 80s clothes. So you see what I mean? It's true that if you think about these kind of formats beforehand, doing them during the shoot is really nothing. You have a videographer coming for 2 days on the shoot, and it's really easy to do. And then it will create like the kind of social media content that is more engaging than just a traditional interview saying, yeah, it was great to work with this director. They're so talented, which is also useful. You also need that, but it's good to have.
But are you then holding that material for when the film releases.
So basically, we will create a social media package for the film in the autumn, and it will probably premiere at a festival next year. And so that's when we will release everything and create a social media package.
I've seen more and more as well, because obviously there's a lot of rules and regulations on set. As a producer, I'm always quite nervous. My company makes The Night Manager, and you can imagine there was quite a lot of do not film anything on this set, no spoilers. But what's been really brilliant is some of our actors, Diego Calva, our director, Georgie Banks-Davis, took their own pictures on set, and we use those now even to remind people you can go and binge the whole series. Is stuff like that, like cast and people capturing stuff themselves, feeling more authentic and connected?
Super useful, and especially, again, when it's younger audience. I remember when we worked on Rocks, the Sarah Gavron film, we gave all the girls mobile phones, and they were capturing each other between the takes, and they were really they all come from drama schools, and they're really into dancing, so they would do like dance competitions between takes, and that they will film each other, and that was super useful for the UK release for sure. I can't remember if any other distributors used it, but it's such a fun way for audience to engage with both the character but the personality behind, or the actor behind. And it's a great use of talent on set, because getting them to do anything later, good luck. They're not going to look anything like this. They're not in costume. So again, utilizing the time on set, working very closely with producers, and if needed, scheduling those things. But it's no matter which distributor you get later on, it's money can't buy later.
But maybe one little red flag here, it's also remember that you are still promoting a film that will be seen on a big screen. So you need to have some kind of decent production value, or at least like be close to the universe of the film, even in visual terms. And for example, a film like The End of It, that is has this extremely sleek, sophisticated aesthetic and stuff like that, I wouldn't recommend to do too much of a, hey, selfie, hi, I'm Gal Garcia Bernal, blah, 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 because I think it wouldn't you stay in the universe of the film. So obviously every film is different, and I don't know that film in particular, but it's also, try to think of that. You are still promoting, any image that goes out there. People are very visual, humans are very visual animals. So if you show us some images, I will somehow imagine that the film will be looking like that. So, it's also something to kind of see, that's why you need a strategy, a positioning, so that you understand if it fits or if it doesn't fit.
But it's also, I think, very important that you don't release too much too soon. I think there's a danger, again, with first-time directors and producers, it's almost like, where's the publicity? I need publicity. And it's like, okay, what do you actually want publicity for? What's the end result you're looking for? And it's often, they don't think about how much you can potentially waste by letting it run too soon, putting too many stills out at a film festival when really 2 or 3 more than enough. Unfortunately, festivals have a really bad habit of saying, we need 3 clips, we need 10 stills, and it's like, actually, you really don't. You need one clip, you need maybe 3 stills, depending on if you've got what the film is, 1, 2, yeah. But you don't always have to do what festivals tell you.
No, hang on, no, sorry, I lost it.
Don't do what festivals tell you. That's what we're saying. So I want to make sure we have time for audience questions, because I'm sure you've prompted lots of thoughts with everyone. Like digging fully into thinking about when you're then releasing to audience. KARINA, what you were talking about earlier, and several of you have touched on, is the bespoke nature of how each territory might need to do things differently is maybe ebbing away, but then with The Quiet Girl was actually quite different because of the very nature of the film. So for me, the fact that the film is still always central, that's the absolute driving kind of guiding light for any strategy. What for you is sacred? It's always got to be part of your core strategy. And what for you has really radically changed in the last few years?
Go on. No. What's sacred in terms of release, I think, is still getting distributors being able to get access at festivals to actors, directors in their films, because a lot of the chances of people being able to travel the world later. Actors directors obviously tend to be a little bit more attached to their own projects and support them for as long as they need to. But, actors can be off in, a European actor can be off in Australia or shooting a film in the middle of the Amazon, and, they're not available. So getting people while they're on the ground here and then making the journalists sit on those interviews until they come out. I mean, again, you treat those sort of films with distribution in place very differently from films without distribution here. And often, for example, you wouldn't shoot an interview in Cannes with a sold film with the Cannes backdrop because you don't necessarily want people to know in 6 months' time when that film opens in Germany or Italy or wherever, that interview, somebody's been sitting on that interview for 6 months. So, you do have to customize interviews with talent. But I do think for distributors, knowing that they might not get access to people in the future, to try and at least help, it doesn't, always, you're not going to make a silk purse out of a sow's ear, but if you've got that talent support there in the bag, I think it does make a big difference. And certainly we, still get the sense that's what distributors value more than anything else.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously, I think it was last year during Venice, there was a lot of kind of conversation around press not getting access to high-profile talent and what the source of this frustration. But in terms of marketing, I would say that even though different territories might have slightly different positioning needs, since everything lives these days online, ideally, and I love collaborating and kind of working in collaborative spirit, if you have distributors on board while the film is shooting, try to kind of get them together and think of positioning and see if you can come up with similar positioning to work on a campaign together. It's not always possible, and I remember 15 years ago I launched We Need to Talk About Kevin here, and we had one poster for the festival, and afterwards each distributor created their own poster, and at the end there were 21 posters for the same film. I think it would be tricky to do it these days since everything lives online and it would just be too confusing. But to give one example, there's one film premiering in the festival here in Uncertain Regard, and it's Victorian Psycho. And during the production of this film, we pre-sold the film in quite a lot of territories, but we collaborated with the UK and US distributor, and we did a poster shoot, and we captured actually quite a lot of social media content, and we work very closely together. And even though between the US and the UK distributor, the positioning wasn't completely the same, but we found a way to agree on a joint campaign. And I think this is really beneficial, and most likely the other territories will pick it and run with it. And in terms of online visibility, if you have the UK, US, and some of the European territories having the same campaign, it just feels like a bigger film. So it feels more commercial and more studio title.
But also I think, since there's quite a lot of producers and directors in the room, your job is also to kind of open marketing possibilities. So, for example, we work on a lot of LGBTQI+ films, and in some territories, they're going to be picked by the local Peccadillo Pictures, who's really going to promote it as a very gay film. So you need to have stills with, the pretty lead without his T-shirt on and two men kissing. Maybe in other territories, it will be, they will position it less as a queer film and more, as an art house, blah, blah, blah. And then maybe, you need to put the T-shirt back on and make sure that they're not kissing and looking into different directions. No, but here I'm saying this a bit as a joke, but it is normal that it will be, positioned in different ways in different things. And so your job during the shoot is to create material that will allow these different things. For example, when we work on kids films, when we create social media packages, we create some assets for the parents, some assets for the kids. You're not going to convince them in the same way to come. So what I mean is, see your job as opening marketing possibilities. And then there will be people whose job it is, your local distributor in the Czech Republic will know better than you how to promote that film. But if you have the different options on the table, if you give them the different options of the table, they will be able to pick those options. And very often, you know, we end up being very limited in what we can do because the initial material is not there. So I think that is really your main
just
job.
reinforces this message of spend money on a unit photographer. Don't, because they're always the first things to go when people are trying to cut budgets. The publicist goes, the photographer goes, and it's a false economy.
But not just that, also, you know, what I also say to producers is, for example, some producers hire us to create social media packages for the film. Some others go like, yeah, it's not my job, it should not come from our budget. But I'm always saying, you know, it's what? Between 4 and 10,000 euros, you know, from a production budget of 1.5 million, it's not that, you know, it's not that big of a spend. And then it gives you more, you know, it empowers you as a producer, because then, of course, if you have really cool social media materials that you can give to distributors, then some distributor will want to do it their own way. For example, the Italians, they always do that for some reason. But then some others will be really happy to have these materials, and you will be helping like the later life of your film. So, you know, of course, still, I mean, stills are essential, but you can even think a bit beyond that.
Fantastic. We're going to open for some questions. We have a microphone, so pop your hand up. We'll come straight to man in white top here, and then the person next, and then there.
Thank you, everybody. My question is, you mentioned traditional press and media. What about new media? Because, you know, a big YouTube channel, a review from a YouTuber can get millions of more views than an article in a journal, or a good podcast can get millions of more views than your biggest BBC like talk show. So how do you see new media in like promoting films?
Incredibly important, but I think that's more important when the film is going to market, when it's actually, you know, you're targeting the public. I still think from a festival perspective, what you're trying to do is attract, you're targeting potential buyers, and I'm not sure they are the people who are necessarily, you know, in the first instance. I think, you know, unless I'm completely wrong here, I do think still, you know, if you're an independent distributor here in Cannes looking to buy films, you're looking at the trades, you're looking at those publications either from your own country or from other countries where reviews, for example, are posted very quickly. I mean, a lot of countries, when they come to Cannes, a lot of press, when they come to Cannes, don't post quickly. I mean, there are certain territories that do. You know, the UK does, US does, obviously France, but some of the smaller territories don't necessarily post reviews instantly.
Yeah.
They do roundups at the end of the festival or whatever. But it's just that thing of trying to, I mean, one of our jobs here is just to make sure that potential distributors are aware of what particularly the critical response to a film is going to be. Because if you're an independent distributor with an art film, you need to know that your local critics are going to support it when it opens, because in the end, that's going to be the most important tool towards success.
KARINA, how important is that though going to audience? Because you know, we're seeing the rise of letterboxd really encouraging cinema going in a younger generation. For you at that end of the spectrum, is that a really useful path to tread?
100%. I mean, letterboxd, they're kind of doubling up, I think. They are B2B and B2C. But I just wanted to add to what Jonathan said. If you already have distributors on board, they get the chance to nominate which outlets to be part of the junket. So, for example, I worked on a horror film in Berlin called Saccharine, and it kind of pre-sold in a lot of territories. And interestingly, a lot of the distributors have nominated not traditional media, but a lot of kind of the horror YouTube influencers or critics. So that was really interesting deep dive to see a very specific genre press in new media kind of world. But that's where, if you have distributors already on board, that's where you also see kind of their thinking, how they're going to position the film, and who is important in terms of critical acclaim in their territory.
And then just here.
Thank you so much. It's really useful. And I was wondering, because from my understanding, we've been talking a lot about features, and I was wondering if there's a major difference you notice with short films in comparison to feature films as to the sort of preparation that is needed before the shooting?
Maybe, at least, I mean, from our point of view, the thinking is exactly the same, you know? So, in a way, you know, like everything that we say, let's be honest, very often short films have less of a market. So, you know, it's more like proving skills, getting reputation for the director, for the producer. So marketing materials are less important. Very few people go and watch a short film because of its poster. It's just part of a program at a festival. So I would say it's less important, but the thinking is the same. Like, you know, if you can do good marketing for a short film, do it. You know, it doesn't cost more than doing bad marketing.
You still need a strong still, I think. A lot of us, you know, when we open a catalog or we look at it online, we often, before we even read the log line, we choose by the visuals. So I would say you still need good stills. But from like wearing sales hat, if you've made a short, that's definitely a strong calling card. And we would always, whenever we would pitch a debut, if the filmmakers have made shorts or a short, needless to say, if it won or went to festivals, that's a very strong calling card in terms of selling to distributors.
Yeah, I mean, if we get approached by short film directors about to shoot something, I just say to them, you don't need a publicist. Don't waste money on a publicist, spend money on a photographer, and make sure you have the materials you need. Because in terms of actually press activity, there's very, very little. I don't want to be defeatist, but certainly until you're in a festival, you know, in a shorts program, there's very, very little that can be done.
I would testify to that. When I ran a video channel, I went to a short film screening purely because of an incredible still at South by Southwest. Genuinely, it was a short film by a filmmaker I'd never heard of called Charlotte Wells, who then went on to make After Sun. I programmed it on my channel. You know, we gave it press and editorial. It's a channel called Nowness that I used to run. And it, like that still in a list of, it was like a 2-hour program. Some of the shorts were great, some of them weren't. But that still, I was like, what is this? And a really good synopsis. I would ask lots of other people to help you hone your synopsis because you're not perhaps the most objective audience for your film. So ask lots and lots of people to watch and engage with it is really powerful.
Oh yeah, I have a small tip. If you're a filmmaker, go and schmooze and network here, and with every person you meet, do a different pitch. Just experiment.
Be your own publicist.
It's really fun, and it just becomes a playground then. So you're not like rigid. You need to memorize the 2 sentences. Just play and see how people respond to it.
I have another question here.
Hello, and thank you for all the great insights from the panel. I'm the founder, I'm William, I'm the founder of the Human Made Mark. We certify and celebrate the fact there are human artists behind the camera and in front of the camera against the tidal wave of generative AI. Since we launched in Variety last month, you know, something we've noticed is that amongst Gen Z audiences, there's a real growing backlash towards generative AI. But of course, there's a lot of stories about even big budget films. They might have actors, but they're using generative AI to replace lots of heads of departments. There's that film about Bitcoin with Casey Affleck that's coming out at the moment. So a lot of conversations I'm having with producers is that you might be saving money and replacing lots of artists, but actually perhaps in the marketing, the PR part of the story, do you think people should be mindful of the potential backlash actually when films have heavy AI, generative AI usage in them? Is that a consideration that you're already thinking about? Is it something you're thinking about for the future?
So basically all AI models, when you say film marketing, most of what they have learned comes from Hollywood films because they are invading the social space or the digital space so much. So I very, very rarely get a decent synopsis written by AI. I very rarely get a decent, you know, we try saying, hey, this is like, you know, 3-page like description of a film. Can you give me a marketing strategy? It normally never is relevant for the kind of films we work on, which are, you know, very artsy, you know, festival films. So for me, at the moment, I don't really see much danger because it's not working. And also because AI doesn't understand that we call them films, but Hollywood films and festival films are two separate universes, you know? I mean, well, you work on both. There are some places where they kind of meet, but, you know, in terms of market, in terms of how you market them and stuff. So no, I don't see that as much of a risk at the moment. And then if, you know, but do I check my synopsis every time I write a synopsis? I check it with AI. I'm like, can you write it again? Can you make 3 other, you know, suggestions for the same synopsis? It helps me finalize it and fine-tune it. So we also use AI to help our work.
I want to squeeze in one last question, unless anyone's got super pressing. Just here.
Hello. Thank you for this. I'm also a film publicist. I've been approached and I'm very conscious of emerging filmmakers who are working on films or have films, but their production companies obviously aren't as established and they're usually working with talent who aren't names. So I'm really, I guess this is a question of answers for everyone in the room about any tips and advice on like what they could do, because press typically are interested in names. They will cover something that has, you know, that is a bit more established or has talent attached to it. So if there's any tips and advice on press and marketing on what filmmakers can do if they don't have a name or talent.
Are you talking about films coming to festivals, films while they're shooting?
A bit of both. If you,
I mean, it just goes back to some of the things we've said earlier today. I mean, during production, it's just a case of ensuring that all of the assets that would help a successful launch are in place. And that doesn't really, you know, whether the stars of the film are, you know, famous or completely unknown, you still need to do the same thing, because obviously everybody makes a film in the hope that it will be seen widely. So you have to help it potentially be seen widely by getting all those assets like good photography. I know we keep banging on about good photography, but it really, really helps. And then when you come to, you know, you go out, whether it's, you know, to Cannes or a smaller festival. I mean, what we haven't had time to touch on at all is that, you know, keep my voice down when I say this, Cannes is not the be all and end all. You know, you can die here as much as you can thrive. And sometimes, you know, people don't look beyond bringing a film to Cannes. I'm talking, again, a first or second feature. There are lots of other festivals out there that might be better for your particular film. And you need to put a bit of thought into, you know, where to launch it, because, you know, again, better to be a big fish in a small pond than to be a small fish in this incredibly large pond.
But the Cannes Laurel is so beautiful.
Yeah, but, you know, there's some other nice ones as well. But, you know, like I said, look at, you know, if you have a film that you want to take to a festival, you think it would benefit from being at a festival, then, you know, you need to look at all the festivals that are around, talk to other filmmakers, talk to somebody who's maybe made a similar film to you, or, you know, and look at, you know, where did that launch? Did it, you know, was it just, you know, if it's a British film, did it get a world premiere at the London Film Festival, for example? You know, or Edinburgh, which has now, you know, got a competition strand for first and second features. The other thing is that, going back to the we said earlier about the trade press, you know, a lot of the trades have media partnerships with festivals, and what that means is that, you know, there's a financial arrangement between Screen, Variety, Deadline, Hollywood Reporter, whoever, with some of the smaller festivals, whereby, you know, the festival pays the trades to guarantee a certain amount of coverage, and that could be, you know, 6 stories, it could be 10 reviews. So if you go through, I'll just use Screen as an example, you go through Screen and look at where certain small films were reviewed in Screen, you'll think, hang on a minute, you know, how come so many of these films were reviewed out of the Galway Film Festival in Ireland? And that's because Screen has a media partnership with Galway, and part of that deal is that they'll review half a dozen films. But at least that means that your film stands a much better chance. If you're in Galway, you probably stand a high chance of getting a review. One of those all-important reviews that that buyers are looking for than if you come here or Berlin or Venice and nobody looks at you because there are too many big, starry, auteur-driven titles.
Yep. That's a great point. And I think also try and make a virtue of the fact that it's maybe a really young, interesting ensemble cast. They did a great job on Rocks with that. So you can make a virtue of that too. I made a short film with an actor that nobody had heard of called Olivia Colman once. So you can just point back to things and go, spotted this. We've run out of time, but I want you to join me in thanking this incredible panel. I have definitely learnt a lot. Thank you so much for your time.
Welcome.
Thank you all for being here.